Good evening, everybody. This is an interesting experience for me. I'm talking to a blank screen without seeing anybody, but I hope that you can hear me and understand me. Today, we're going to be talking about oranges and lemons and the rest of their family. If there are any British people among you, you'll understand oranges and lemons, which is an old nursery rhyme that we Brits learn. And we're going to be talking about how to manage citrus, an explanation of the origins of citrus, and we're going to talk about the most common species. Before we get into this, let me ask you a question. Who are the biggest citrus producers in the world? Who produces the most oranges? Who produces the most grapefruit? Who produces the most tangerines? And who produces the most lemons and limes? Do you have any thoughts about that? Well, here is the answer. Which are the top citrus producing countries in the world? Here's the answer. Oranges. Here is the answer for oranges. China is 10 million pounds. Brazil is the highest with 17 million, followed by India, Mexico, the USA, and Spain. Tangerines is China with nearly 20,000 tons, followed by Brazil and the others. Lemons and limes, India are the highest producers, followed closely by Mexico. It must be all of the limes that are put in the Coronas that pushes their numbers up. Grapefruit and Pomelo is China, and then the others are fairly low. So here are the totals, but what is interesting is that China produces nearly 27%. That's over 1/4 of the world's total production of citrus, oranges, tangerines, lemons, and limes, followed by Brazil, then India, and then finally the USA. China does a lot of export of tangerines locally, and Brazil, a lot of the Brazil production is used for juice, which is used for export. Lemons and limes, the Indians use a lot of lemons and limes in their cooking. Okay, let's talk a little bit about citrus now. Citrus originated in Southeast Asia, China and India, many, many years ago. Portuguese traders brought citrus from Asia to Europe in the 12th century, and even Christopher Columbus introduced lime and sweet oranges to Haiti in 1493. So citrus has been around for a long time. By 1565, citrus plants arrived into Florida, and by 1770, the Spanish missionaries spread citrus fruit across the USA to Texas and California. Now, one thing to know about citrus plants is that they cross-pollinate very readily. So if you take seed from a citrus fruit, whether it be orange or grapefruit or what have you, it could produce a plant that is completely different from the parent, depending on what pollinated it. So the only way to be sure of reproducing a citrus plant is to use a cutting or a bud graft, which is what is used these days. You cannot take a seed from a citrus plant and plant it, because who knows what you will end up with. Now, there are only 3 true citrus species. The others are thought to be species which are hybrids, which occurred naturally many years ago because of what I said, how readily citrus species cross-pollinate. So these took place many years ago, and they've been propagated by grafting. So let's talk about grafting a little bit. Let's see what happens. The upper part of the tree, which bears the fruit, that is called a scion. And here we have a plant here, and here is the upper plant, and that is the scion, and that is what bears the fruit. The lower part of the tree is the rootstock. And when mature wood is grafted onto the rootstock, it will bear seed in 3 to 5 years. If you grow your own seed from seed, it will take 10 to 15 years to bear fruit, if it even bears fruit that you want. So you should really never try to grow seed of a citrus and hope that it will give you a plant. So here we have rootstock and a scion. So how it's done is you take a bud from a known variety and you graft it onto a rootstock to give you the desired fruit. Now the rootstock is very important, and having one correctly developed for your area is the key to successful production. And the local nurseries know what the best rootstock is for your area. So do not try to go outside of this area, maybe visiting a friend or something, and buy a seedling at a nursery there and bring it back to where you currently live, because it may not be best suited for your area. So you need to get your seedlings from local providers. So this is how a bud graft is done. Here we have a bud stick from your desired plant, which is giving you the fruit that you want. Using a very sharp knife, you cut out the bud from the bark. Then you go to your rootstock and you cut a T across the top here and gently down just underneath the bark. Then taking the bud, you could slip it down underneath the bud, underneath the bark rather, just into the bud, and then you wrap it up with a special paper in order to keep it snug. You cut it off at the top here, and then this bud here will be stimulated and it will develop to grow into the scion, which is the parent that you want. So what sort of a rootstock do we use? To be useful, the rootstock must be compatible with the scion. Sometimes rootstocks and scions don't work well together, so you have to make sure that the rootstock and the scion is one that works together. It must adapt to the local soil conditions, and the rootstock must adapt to the local climate and be resistant to the local problems. The whole point of the rootstock is that it provides a strong rooting system, a vigorous annual growth, and the desirable fruit quality. Very often you have problems with root diseases, but if you get a good rootstock that is good for your area, it will be able to withstand the local root diseases and will give you a good plant. This bottom thing is most important. The dwarfing characteristic is given by the rootstock. It's the rootstock itself that actually provides the dwarfing characteristic. So if you want a dwarf plant, you have to make sure that you are using a rootstock that provides the dwarfing characteristic. And in the rootstock, which controls the dwarfing of the trees, the fruits will be normal size, but the tree produces about 50 to 60% of normal fruits, which is what you want. If you are growing a dwarf plant, you want to have a normal size fruit, but you have to accept not having as many fruit as possible because you are growing a dwarf size. And dwarfing can be unpredictable, unfortunately, and it can reduce the size from 25 to 50. And dwarfing is also affected by climatic growing conditions. So therefore, make sure that if you're going to grow a dwarf plant, you do it from a local nursery. And again, you do not go out of your area, buy a dwarf plant because it happens to be a sale somewhere else, and then plant it, bring it back and plant it. So what plants are commonly used for rootstocks? There are different kinds. There are rough lemons, bitter orange, a trifoliate orange. I'll get into that a bit later. That's the most common one. And sometimes you have special hybrids, which are sweet orange crossed with a trifoliate, which are developed just for rootstocks. But the most common one is what's known as the trifoliate orange. The trifoliate orange is sometimes called a Japanese or Chinese bitter orange, and it belongs to the same citrus family and is close enough to be able to be a rootstock so that it does not object if you bud to it from a citrus. And it differs from citrus in that it has compound leaves, and I'll get into that later, and fruits have a downy surface. It's frost hardy, it's very good for rootstock, but the fruits themselves are very bitter. So they're no good for eating, but they are widely used in Oriental medicine. They have strong thorns on twisted branches, and they're used as a hedge plant. So here we have a picture of a trifoliate orange, which is used, and you can see trifoliate, 3 leaves. Here are the 3 leaves. Here are the 3 leaves. So this is a typical trifoliate orange, which is used as a fruit stock. Look at the fruits. The fruits look like an orange, which sometimes causes problems later on. They have thorns. Here are the branches with a thorn. It's a great big thorn on it. So it's a rough orange with thorn. It looks like an orange, and it has its 3 leaves. Here is a close-up of it. You can see the 3 leaves of the trifoliate and a very rough-looking fruit, which really is not worth eating or doing anything with other than as a rootstock. So in buying a citrus seedling, obtain it from a local nursery who should have the best seed stock for the area. Here is a picture where I went to a nursery, a local nursery, and I saw they had an orange here, tangerine here in their pot here, and looking out at the side, I could see this strange looking growth from the side. And it actually happened to be coming out from below the bud. And when I took a good look at it, I laid it down. Here you can see the trifoliate leaf. So what we had here was a citrus being grown in a plant, but it had actually produced a shoot from below the bud. And it was a trifoliate, not what this person or this fruit said it would be, which would be an orange. Here we have a picture of a friend of mine who said that some of the branches on their citrus had huge fruits on them, and what were they? So I had a look at the plant, and it's a little bit difficult to see here, but here we have a close-up of it. Here on the right, here is the base of the plant, and here is the graft where you could see the swollen stem was where the graft is, and below the graft is this branch coming up, which is the trifoliate, and here are the trifoliate leaves. So this person, this plant was growing a trifoliate leaf, and no wonder the person said that her fruit that she was having was bitter and so on. So the answer here was to cut it off, here and remove this, and then let the rest of the plant develop. This is a common problem where people say, fruits in my tree are not growing well. They're giving some of the branches are giving rough fruits, you have to follow the branch down. And if it goes all the way down to the bottom below the graft, then you know that you have a shoot from the rootstock and you have to cut it out. So here's a picture of a question that Helpline has, why the fruits have taste bitter and they look like an orange, but they grow in the from the rootstock, and that's what you're having. Okay, let's, excuse me while I get a glass of water. Okay, talk about citrus. They're native in tropical and subtropical areas, so they don't like prolonged cold weather because they can damage the trees and the fruit. And citrus requires warm weather to produce sugars. This is important to know, that we all want fruit which is sweet, so we all want sugars in the fruit, and citrus needs warm weather to give the sugars rather. So sweet varieties like orange and mandarins, they need to be grown in warmer areas. Grapefruit has the highest heat requirement, so they need one of the best producing areas. Ventura is not warm enough to grow good oranges, which is why so many lemons are produced here. Ojai is warmer, which is why the oranges and the mandarins are grown in Ojai. So that's why you see lemons being grown mostly around Ventura, and the oranges are up in, tangerines are up in Ojai, which is warmer because Ventura does not have enough a warm temperature. The most susceptible to cold is lime, then lemon. This is the area. Pomelo, grapefruit, orange, mandarin, and kumquat is the most tolerant. That will take the most cold, whereas lime will take the least cold. Sudden high temperatures can have a negative effect on trees, causing flowers and leaves to drop off, fruits to split, and this is what happens every now and again. And cold weather can cause damage to fruits, especially if the fruit is thin-skinned. So this is a problem that citrus growers have to face with what the weather conditions are. Fruits close to maturity have a high sugar content, so they can withstand more cold. Now, many fruits like apples, pears, and peaches, they can be picked when they're immature, and you keep them on your kitchen table or in a plate, and they will ripen and become soft. Not citrus. Citrus does not do this. Once you pick a citrus from a tree, no further increase in sweetness takes place. And by the way, strawberries and grapes are the same. If you pick strawberries too soon, and those of you in Ventura who may be growing strawberries want to pick strawberries before they quite ripen, they will not become sweeter after being picked. Strawberries and grapes do not ripen after being picked. Neither does citrus. Once it's picked, no further increase in sweetness takes place. So you must allow citrus to grow to maturity and ripen on the plant. And only when the fruit is completely mature will it start to reduce acidity and convert the starches to sugar. And you need warm temperatures for this, which is why I said Ojai is better for producing sweet oranges and lemons than Ventura. And the only way to test for citrus sweetness is to taste it. So if you have a citrus tree with oranges, pick one orange and eat one orange. And if it doesn't taste very sweet, don't pick any more. Leave it on the tree. Wait a week, wait 2 weeks, pick another one, then eat it. And if it then tastes sweet, then you know the sugars are starting to sweeten, and then you can start to pick more. Here is a bag that I saw that amused me, advertising fruit grower was advertising California oranges. It says tree ripened. That's the only way to ripen citrus on the tree. You can't pick it off and let it ripen afterwards. Okay, the color of the skin is not a method of determining whether a fruit is sweet or not, because they can turn color well before they're sweet. And the citrus fruit only turns yellow or orange when the temperatures start to cool and the chlorophyll breaks down. Oranges in the tropics, they don't turn yellow at all. They ripen, become sweet, they stay green because the chlorophyll is preserved. So if they're going to pick fruit and export them to the US or to Europe, they are picked when they're ripe and they are fully green. They are then treated with ethylene gas to turn them orange, and then they're sent to the US and European markets. So people in the US and in Europe would not buy a green orange because they are used to thinking that an orange has to be yellow. Not at all. The yellow color is only the temperature going down, which turns it yellow. Here we have green oranges from the Caribbean. These are from Jamaica. These are from Brazil. If anybody of you is in a cruise and you stop at a Caribbean port and you see green oranges being sold, for goodness sake, buy one and eat one. They will be very, very sweet because of the high temperatures in the Caribbean, which produces the high sugars, and they are sweet. It's only the Europeans and the Americans that expect oranges to be yellow, so therefore they are treated with ethylene gas to turn them yellow. So this is a fairly silly statement, perhaps, which we all know, but what does it mean? California and Florida have opposite climates. Well, yes, of course, but California has low humidity, dry summers, rain in the winter, and the cool California nights give oranges with bright color, thick skin. So these are usually what's sold in a supermarket, California oranges. Florida, on the other hand, has high humidity, lots of rainfall, giving oranges with a smooth skin but of uneven color. So maybe not so good for marketing because of the appearance, but very sweet and juicy. So these are more used in the juice industry, which is why we hear of Florida orange juice and rather more so than California oranges. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to grow citrus now. What are the cultural practices? So if you're going to grow citrus, you need to plant your citrus in an area with well-drained soil. Citrus plants do not like wet roots. As much sun and heat as possible. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you want to have sweet citrus, and most people grow citrus because they want them to be sweet, you have it as much sun and heat as possible. Don't grow them in a shady nook if that's what you have. Protected from strong winds. Try not to plant in the middle of a lawn if you can, or other area which receives too much water. Otherwise, that could end up with getting root rocks. So if you must plant in a lawn, clear a circle with a diameter about 6 feet. Make a hole twice as wide as the root ball, but the same depth. Do not go any deeper than the root ball because you don't want the stem to be covered with soil when you fill it in. So make a hole twice as wide. The bottom of the hole should be firm so the root ball is not going to sink down after you planted it. And put the tree in the hole the same depth as it was in the container. That's important because you want to keep the stem that was above ground in the container also above ground in your garden. So, because if it's too deep, the moisture around the base of the trunk will promote various root rots. So cut and remove any broken or decayed, twisted roots and backfill the soil with native soil. You do not have to go rushing out buying potting soil. You're planting your tree in native soil. You're digging out a hole, put the seedling in and fill it back with native soil, because that's what it's going to have to get used to, and it needs to get used to it right away. Here's an example of a tree that was planted too shallowly. Now, what happened here probably was the person dug a hole, put the tree down in, looked at it and said, oh, I've dug enough, I don't want to dig anymore. And so just left it there. Take it out, dig down an extra 5 or 6 inches, put it back down, and then cover it. You do not want to leave these roots exposed to the outside elements, because they will get damaged and it will be bad for the tree. So this is not a good example of how to plant a citrus tree, or any tree for that matter. So you need to water it, so construct a basin which keeps the water off the base of the trunk, because if you over it too much, that can lead to root rot. And what's interesting is that although Ventura is in a pretty dry area, more trees in fact die from overwatering than from drought. People tend to give more water than is necessary. And if the tree's in a container, be very careful. It's so easy to overwater. And in hot summer months, you may need to water every 7 to 10 days, and in the winter, 14 to 20 days, depending on how hot the temperature is. And as the tree grows and the roots grows into the native soil, you move your watering points further from the trunk. Pruning, a lot of people ask, what about pruning? Do I have to prune my citrus trees? No, you do not. Young citrus trees do not require pruning. However, if it looks wild, or if there's something odd or one branch that's way out of whack, by all means, prune it to tidy it up and keep it looking nice. But you do not have to prune trees like you do to the stone fruits. The best time to do this is in early spring, after the frost has passed, and just before new growth begins, and so you can prune it and shape your tree and have it looking good. You can do minor pruning to regulate the height, open up the interior which you want, and especially if you see any dead wood or broken branches, you need to take those off. And occasionally we have a severe freeze. To hold back on the pruning until you know exactly if the freeze really did affect your tree or not. Don't immediately prune back, wait and see if any stems are dead, leaves are off, and then you can prune and cut off the dead leaves. And of course, always remove any sucker growth from below the graft. As I said earlier, if you see any sucker growth from below the graft, make sure you remove that. Here is something which happens, which causes a lot of people consternation. After pollination is completely finished, the plant may in fact shed many small pea-sized fruit as the plant establishes how much fruit it can bear, and that's quite normal. Frequently, the citrus plant will pollinate and fertilize many more fruits than it feels that it can normally handle. It knows, depending on how strong it is, how much roots, how well developed the root system is, and how many fruits it can really bring to maturity. And especially if it's under stress, it will do the same thing. And it just, like excessive heat or lack of water, it suddenly decides, I really can't go on with all of this, and it just starts dropping fruit, and this is quite normal. So here you have fruit drop of these marble-sized fruits, and once pollination is finished, it could drop off 50, 60, 70% of these fruits lying on the ground. And most people get really worried about it. But as long as there are some remaining on the tree itself, then you're fine. This is just nature's way of deciding how much fruit this particular plant can bear, and it goes on from there. So don't worry about it. Just pick them up and continue looking after your plant. Not too much water, because that will cause more stress, and let it develop the fruits that it has left on the plant. Fertilizing. This is very important. Citrus plants require regular nitrogen, especially in the Ventura area. Nitrogen is the most important element that citrus needs. Most of the other two major elements, phosphate and potash, are sufficient in the soils, but nitrogen is what is lacking, and you need to make sure that your citrus plant gets enough nitrogen. You can use specialty citrus fertilizers if you like. Fertilizers, you probably know, contain three numbers: NPK, nitrogen, phosphate, potash. The N, the first one, nitrogen, should be the highest number. Here is a 1064. Here is a 1648. You can use this. Or you can just use straight nitrogen, sulfate of ammonia, which contains 21%. And you need to apply fertilizer 2 or 3 times a year. For me, twice is enough, but you could do it 3 times if you wanted. First application, January or February, as the plant is waking up from winter. Second in May or June as it's growing. And a third may be in September or October as it's getting the end of the year. And citrus sometimes, or very often, is affected by zinc or iron deficiency. And I'll talk about that later, which can be applied as a foliar spray. This is a micronutrient. So adult citrus trees, which are 5 years or old, need 5 pounds of nitrogen per year. And younger trees, obviously, they need less. So 5 pounds of nitrogen a year. So the first year they need 3 tablespoonfuls. In the second year, 1/4 pound of actual nitrogen. Third year, 1/2 pound. Fourth year, 3/4. And the fifth year is what I'm saying, an annual application of 1 pound of actual nitrogen, which accounts to 5 pounds of fertilizer if you use sulfate of ammonia, which is the most common fertilizer. You want to get a bag of sulfate of ammonia, 21%, and we're going to give 5 pounds of fertilizer per year. How do we do this? Here's an easy way. An adult tree requires 5 pounds of sulfate of ammonia. So we're going to give 2.5 pounds in January and February, and 2.5 pounds in July and August. That gets us our 5 pounds. So 1 cup of sulfate of ammonia weighs 8 ounces, more or less. So 5 cups will be 2.5 pounds. So mark 5 spots around the drip line of the tree. Dig down 6 inches, pour 1 cup of fertilizer into each hole. So now you've got your 2.5 pounds. Cover that hole with soil to prevent the nitrogen being lost as volatilizing as ammonia gas. And now you've given your tree 2.5 pounds. And you do that again in July, August. And do this a day or 2 before your next water application so that the water can start to dissolve the nitrogen in the fertilizer and take it down to the roots. And your trees will thank you for this. So if you don't do that, this is what you might find. Nitrogen deficiency, which is very common. The entire leaf is pale and yellow. Here we have nitrogen deficiency in citrus. The entire leaf is pale and yellow. Now, if you see this, and you go out and you add your fertilizer, you remember it's going to take 3, 4, 5 weeks before the tree actually absorbs it and before you see any difference. And if you happen to do this right now in November, it's going to take even longer, because as the temperature is dropping, so tree growth and activity is dropping. So you're not going to see any results for quite a while. So besides a lack of nitrogen, often you also see yellowing of leaves. And this is caused by mineral deficiencies. So besides nitrogen, you can also have lack of iron, zinc, magnesium, and manganese. These are the most common. And you correct these by applying a foliar application of these minerals. This is the best way to use it. You can buy a compound fertilizer which contains many of the trace elements, but applying a foliar application is one way to be sure that you can get iron, zinc, magnesium into your citrus, which is a very common problem which we have. And by the way, overwatering can also cause the leaves to turn yellow. So if you look at your plants turning yellow, pause while you consider how much water you give it. So here we have citrus with iron deficiency. Now, if you remember the previous slides I showed of nitrogen deficiency, the entire leaf was yellow. Here we have the veins are remaining dark green, and it's the spaces between the veins which are pale yellow. That's iron deficiency. Here we have zinc deficiency, same sort of thing. In between the veins, the leaves are going yellow. The veins themselves are dark green. That is zinc deficiency. Here we have magnesium deficiency. Again, the veins are dark green. In between the veins is pale yellow. Here's manganese, same thing. The veins are green, in between are light yellow, like here too. This could be anything. Could be iron or zinc or manganese. And the only way to be sure to know what your deficiency is to take leaf samples, take them to a laboratory, and have them analyze the leaf to see if there's a deficiency in any of these elements, iron, zinc, manganese. That's way too much for us ordinary gardeners. So this is what we do. If your tree is showing yellowing of the leaves between the veins, you need to add iron and zinc. You can buy something like this. It's fairly cheap, costs about $10 a gallon. Iron and zinc, which are the two main problems that we have. And it contains 2% of iron, and 0.2% rather, of chelated zinc. And follow the label instructions. You make a solution of this and you spray it onto the leaves themselves. Follow label instructions. If you make it too concentrated, you will end up burning the leaves of your plant, and that's not good. So follow label instructions. Spray the leaves of the plant until they're wet. No need to spray anymore. Once the leaf is wet, it's wet. You could do it again in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and again in maybe a third week after that, and that will help to give iron and zinc to your citrus. Don't be bamboozled by bull. Here we have, I've seen this being advertised, called moon juice. It doesn't contain any more iron or zinc than the previous one, than this one. This one is $10 a pound. This one is $40 a pound, plus all of this lovely advertising, supercharged and improved formulas and so on. Just get iron and zinc and spread that, and don't worry about this is just marketing. So you can buy specialty citrus foods. If you go, here's one that I saw, Vigoro, which had 646, but it also contained these micronutrients. boron, copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, sulfur, and zinc. And Lewis Miller, again, look at this high amount of nitrogen, and it contains boron, iron, manganese, molybdenum, sulfur, and zinc. So they contain the microelements needed. So if you don't want to add the straight sulfate of ammonia that I suggested, buy one of these, look at the labels, and if it has these micronutrients, then you're fine applying that instead. So let's look at some of the diseases that affect citrus now. We have root rots, which is caused by poor water management, so don't overwater. We have aphids, we're using insects, mites and scales, leaf miners, which are difficult to control, and these are all problems which we face with growing citrus. Here's a fairly common one with citrus. This is called sooty mold. You see blackening of the leaves. This is a black fungus which is being grown, caused by aphids on this root, on this leaf, and they are secreting a honeydew, a sugary substance which ants love to harvest, and it turns moldy. Here they are. This is a bad infestation. It's actually on the fruit itself. You can control this by you could spray your trees with a strong jet of hose water and wash all of this stuff off to get it off. You can use insecticidal soap, which is a soapy solution, to spray your leaves to kill the aphids, and you need to also control the ants. Here we have leaf miner, which is a tiny little insect which burrows inside the leaf itself, and you can actually see the path of the worm working inside. Here's another one here. You could see that working inside the leaf, and this causes the leaf itself to pucker and look very, very unpleasant. And it's very common, especially in spring when you're getting young, new growth, because the insects like to go there because the leaves are young and the plant reacts by curling up in a fashion like this. You can't do much about it because the insect is inside protected by the leaf. So all you can really do is just wait. And what's good is that most of the citrus plants will grow out of it and they will not be affected. You could try using sticky traps to catch this guy who is the adult, but mostly just be patient and the citrus will grow out of it. We have another disease you probably heard a lot of, Asian citrus psyllid or Huanglongbing, called greening disease, which causes irregular yellowing of the leaves and producing a bitter and deformed fruit. It's spread by a tiny psyllid, has been found in Mexico, Southern California, and has caused a lot of problems in the citrus industry, especially in California. It causes the leaves to be a mottled yellow, and the fruit is deformed like that, with very little fruit juice, very little juice in it. And this is what the guy looks like. The adult is a tiny, tiny guy with his tail sticking up in the air. And these are the young stages with these waxy tubules. So if you hear of people coming around spraying, looking for the psyllid, that's what they're trying to do, because in California, luckily, we don't have much of a problem, and we certainly don't want it to spread. Here's an example here's a healthy root, which shows a plant with healthy roots. And if it's infected, this is what the root system is, because the vascular system is blocked. And of course, there's no development. And so it's a pretty serious disease. So it's caused by this psyllid, which moves the vascular, blocks the vascular system. And the current methods of control, we're trying to eliminate the vector. People have suggested adding micronutrients, but that doesn't eliminate the bacterium. And heat treatment, which people have tried, only slows the bacterium down. So let's look at a few other environmental disorders. You have frost damage, where the tip of the plant is damaged by frost, turns dark brown to black. If you have it, if you're expecting it, by all means, you've got young plants, cover them with a cloth or something to try and protect them from the cold weather. But don't prune these off after the frost has gone. Wait until spring, because this may in fact not be lethal and they may grow out. So if you think you've got frost damage, wait until spring before doing any pruning. Regreening is another problem where people sometimes have, which occurs mostly in Valencia. If you keep your fruit on the trees for too long, in fact, the chlorophyll starts to come back and they get green again. It's no problem, nothing at all. Fruits are often sweeter and juicier. Just continue, just pick them and eat them. You've got fruit splitting, which will drop from the tree. This is stress, usually poor water management. If you keep water away from a tree for a long period of time, say you go away for a month and you don't, or 6 weeks, and you don't water the tree at all, then you come back and give it a lot of water, the tree, which is very thirsty, will suddenly suck up all the water, take it out to the fruits, but push it into the fruit itself. But because the skin has not been able to develop with it, the excess water in the fruit will cause the fruit to split. So this is poor water management. Okay, let's look at the different species. This is now we know all about citrus. Let's know a little bit about what we've got. So taxonomists or botanists have said that there are only 3 true species of citrus fruit, only 3: Pomelo, Mandarin, and Citron. Pomelo, Mandarin, and Citron. You don't need to worry about their Latin names. The other citrus species, bitter or Naval Orange, sweet orange, lemon, lime, grapefruit, tangelo, ugly fruit, and kumquat, they're actually hybrids, which took place years ago naturally, and they've been maintained by the bud grafting system that I spoke about earlier, not from collecting seeds, because as I said, you don't know what you get if you collect the seed, but these actually were a natural pollination years ago. Somebody looked at it and thought, oh, this looks good. They started propagating it by budding, and it's moved ever since. So let's look at the 3 pure species. You've got Pomelo. Pomelo, sometimes called Pomelo, Chinese grapefruit, pamplemousse, or shaddock. Shaddock, the name shaddock comes from the Captain Shaddock who first took this fruit to the West Indies. It's the largest of the citrus fruit. It's about 6 to 10 inches in diameter, weighs 2 to 4 pounds of fruit. The skin is very thick, pale green to yellow, tastes similar to grapefruit, but is much sweeter, but it contains little juice. And here is a typical pomelo fruit, lovely, nice shade, nice color, not green, no, it's sort of yellowy green. It's very nice. Look how thick the skin is, a very, very thick skin. And if you're going to eat it, what you have to do is you peel it, and then this is a thick membrane. You've got to remove the membrane, and then you end up with this segment without the membrane, and it is very sweet. And they also now sometimes come in a black, in a red form developed. Here you can see the membrane has been removed. And if you have a pomelo fruit, you can buy these at upscale groceries and so on. If you're wondering what to do with the fruit and you're looking at this, you're wondering what to do, here's something you could you could make a cat. Cat does not look too pleased, but this was just a fun slide that I saw that somebody used their skin for. Okay. Let's look at mandarin. Mandarin or tangerine, same thing. It's a small growing tree with small fruits, very loose skin. This is easier to peel. but care when you pick it, if you don't pull the fruit off, or you could damage the loose skin. There are a lot of varieties of mandarin. You need to know this. They are alternate bearing depending on your variety. Sometime one year they'll produce a large crop of small fruit, and the next year they'll produce a smaller crop but larger fruit. So if you happen to be getting good yields one year, another yields another year, but different, don't worry about it. That's that particular variety's characteristic. And the name mandarin supposedly was given because the ripe fruit had a rich color similar to the robes worn by the Chinese Mandarin people. So we have tangerine, which is just a variety of mandarin, that's all. And the name thought to have come from Tangiers in North Africa, where the early traders brought the fruit from. You've got clementine, widely grown in Ojai. It's also a variety of mandarin. And the fruits are usually seedless, unless pollinated by nearby citrus. And so this causes some problem, I know, sometimes with clementine growers who suddenly will have a person next to them having a nearby citrus, which can cause pollination for their clementine, causing them to produce seeds and lower the value of their clementine. But a good clementine is usually seedless. And satsuma, that's just a variety of mandarin. So here we have a mandarin, typical mandarin, nice bright color. And here you see the damage if you just rip the fruit off the tree. So if you're going to harvest mandarin, take some clippers and cut them here so that you don't rip, because once you rip the skin off, of course, the fruit will start to dry out and it won't keep so long. So do be careful when you are harvesting tangerines. Okay, now we go to citron. Citron, they're oblong in shape, and there is a variety, fingered variety called Buddha's hand, which I'll show you just now. They have a thick rind, contain very little juice, but they contain a lot of seeds. So they're self-pollinated. They will not accept anybody else. In the early times, they were used for medicinal purposes, but now citron is just used for the zest in cooking. And here you have a typical citron fruit, somewhat rough-skinned, yellow, and it's used for people who want a lot of lemon zest in their cooking. This is the Buddha's hand, where you can see fingers coming out, and this is grown usually just as an ornamental, and it's a fun plant for people to pick the fruit and have as an ornamental. Okay, so what follows, we've gone through the first three, which are regarded as the true species. Here, what we've got now are hybrids, which occurred naturally many years ago due to the ease with which citrus cross-pollinates, as I said earlier, and they've been maintained over the year through grafting or cuttings. So we've got bitter orange. Now, some people, in fact, think that this is a true species on its own, and botanists continue to argue about this. Some say it's a hybrid between a pomelo and a mandarin, inheriting more features of the pomelo, and others say it's the true species. We also know it's a Seville orange, marmalade orange, or sour orange, very common in producing marmalade. This is the orange to use if you're going to make marmalade. It has a thick skin. The oils are used in medicines and liqueurs. Triple sec, Grand Marnier, Curacao, and so on. They will get their oils from bitter orange. But it's also hardy growing, and in fact, sometimes it's used as a rootstock, not just the trifoliate orange that I spoke about earlier, but sometimes you can use bitter orange as a rootstock. Here's a picture of a bitter orange. You can see, looks like an orange, got a thorn here, which would be reminiscent of a rough orange, but this is another thorn there. This is the typical bitter orange. And then we have sweet orange. And this is thought to be a natural hybrid, which occurred many years ago from southern China and northern India between pomelo and mandarin. Think about that. Pomelo and mandarin. Yeah, You could make an orange out of a pomelo and a mandarin, because pomelo and mandarin, they're the two originals. So yeah, sure, pomelo and mandarin, that could make an orange. Probably the most commonly grown fruit tree in the world. You've got Valencia, which is a variety introduced from Spain, from Valencia in Spain, which is why it's called Valencia. And you've got a blood orange, which is a variety where the red color was caused by a pigmentation in the juice. So here we have typical orange, good, nice orange plant with a plant. Naval orange, this is an interesting story. What's a naval orange? Naval orange resulted from a single mutation which was discovered in 1815 in a monastery in Bahia, Brazil, where the mutation caused the orange to develop a second orange as a twin. But the mutation rendered the fruit sterile, so there were no seeds, no breeding. The only way to propagate this is from grafting. So the monks in this monastery in Brazil, they knew they were onto something when they saw this fruit, which was sweet, no seeds. They started propagating it, and the only way to propagate this is from grafting because there's no seed. So think of this, all the navel oranges today have the same genetic makeup as that original fruit tree from Brazil. That one, I believe it was just a branch from one fruit tree in Brazil, has led to all the navel oranges in the world. So they were first sent from Brazil to the USDA research station in Washington, 1823. Then the research station in Washington introduced it to Florida in 1835. Then they sent 12 cuttings to California in 1870. And because they came from the Washington USDA research station, that's why it's called a Washington navel, because that's where they came from. Now, citrus can still mutate fairly readily, like it did way back in 1815. So you do get occasional mutations of the Washington navel, which is why you sometimes will see Cara navel and other things like that. And it's purely a mutation of the original navel orange from Brazil. So here you have a picture of a navel orange. You can see that. And here is the conjoined twin. Here you have it open. There is the twin that's been produced. And this is what we are all familiar with. And here we have why it's called a navel orange. I guess this must be an outie. These must be innie navels. And you can still have an outie navel, but this is why it's called a navel orange, because of the appearance. And here was something interesting I saw. I saw the other day in the supermarket, heirloom navel oranges. Heirloom navel oranges. Well, what is heirloom? Heirloom means something original. So what an heirloom navel orange is, it's the orange from the original source from Washington. I think it's just a marketing ploy, but if you see heirloom navel oranges, it just means that it supposedly came from the original parents that were sent to Washington from Brazil. Okay, we've got a tangerine or a Templar orange, I've seen that. A Tangor or Templar orange I've seen. And it's thought to be a cross between a tangerine and an orange, originating in Jamaica. Came to Florida in 1896, named Temple Orange after a guy, W.C. Temple, who was manager of the Florida Citrus Exchange. Rind is deepish reddish orange, medium thick, moderately adherent, easily peelable. Flesh is orange colored. Many citrus varieties now make their own crosses. You can, in fact, now buy in nurseries all kinds of citrus crosses, where people are now making their own crosses of tangerine and orange, selling it under their own trade names, Tango or Temple Orange. So if you see Temple Orange, it's just been made recently by citrus nurseries. And here is a Tango or Temple Orange. Looks somewhat like a cross between an orange and a tangerine, easily peelable. Lemon, what's a lemon? Lemon is thought to be a cross between a citron and a bitter orange. Think about that for a minute. If you think of my earlier slide, citron, yeah. Bitter orange, yeah, okay, that could make a lemon. That was widely used for medicinal purposes and as an antiseptic. And of course, the famous story was discovered that sailors at sea fed lemon juice did not develop scurvy. So this is the famous thing of citrus. The most common supermarket lemon which we have is Eureka, but there's also a Maya lemon. And Maya lemon was brought to the USA in 1908 by Frank Meyer, who was a great botanist. So they gave it the name after him. It's thought to be a hybrid between a true lemon and a mandarin or sweet orange, but nobody is quite sure. It took place in China. Fruit has thinner skin than Eureka, juice is less acid, contains few seed. So here is the regular Eureka lemon that we're all familiar with. And here is a Maya lemon. Here's the Maya lemon on the left. You can see thinner rind, slightly orange skin, and the bright orange, bright yellow skin of the lemon, and a slightly thicker skin. Then we move on to lime. What is lime? Lime thought to be a cross between citron and lemon. Think about that for a minute. Yeah, if you think of the site of the citrus of the slides I gave earlier on, citron and lemon, yeah, sure, that could make a lime. So there are many different varieties of lime. You've got key lime, Mexican lime, West Indian, bartender's lime, they're all lime. And it's the most sensitive to cold. So if you have a very cold area, it's difficult to grow well. The best flavors developed if grown in a warm climate. So if you've got a really cold area, don't try growing lime. Fruits are small, oval, skin is green or yellow. They contain good juice and often many seeds, widely used in cooking, especially in India. If you can think back to the slide I showed right at the beginning, how India was a huge producer in lemons and limes. That's because they so often use it in cooking in India, widely used in cooking in India, and very, very popular there. So here's the typical lime seed fruit that we all know. Kaffir lime is an interesting lime. We're uncertain exactly how it developed. Thought to be a number of crosses which occurred in Asia. Nobody's quite sure what. Primarily used for its leaves in cooking, used to flavor Asian dishes, especially Thai and other Asian dishes. Fruits have very little juice, almost never eaten though, or they're used for medicinal purposes. And the lime is sometimes used as a zest. Now I put this in here because its leaf has a distinctive large winged petiole. I'll get into that. What is a winged petiole? So here you have a kaffir lime, which we have. Master gardeners will know that this is a fruit outside in our farm in Ventura. And this is the fruit, a really rough fruit indeed, and not much seed inside. Now, winged petiole. Here is a leaf. Here is the leaf blade, and this is the stem known as a petiole. And this particular plant has a winged petiole. Its petiole, its stem, has growths on it, which causes it a wing. So it's called a winged petiole, and it's just a particular characteristic of this particular fruit. And here we have some other leaves. Here we have bitter orange. Look at the petiole there. This is a tiny, tiny little wing on the petiole. Here's a lemon. This has got a greater wing on its petiole. And here's a grapefruit, quite a big wing on its petiole. And then if you go to the kaffir lime, you've got a huge wing on the petiole. This just happens to be a botanical characteristic. Unfortunately, it's not so fixed that you can use it to determine exactly what the variety of fruit is that you have. But I just thought it's an interesting botanical characteristic. If you have citrus in your plants. If you've got grapefruits and oranges and so on, you can look at your own leaves, see if you can see a difference in the wings on the petiole. Okay, moving on. Finger lime. Finger lime is known as caviar lime because when the fruit is cut, it's squeezed, and it looks out like caviar. It was grown in originally called this Citrus australasica because it was grown in Australia. Thorny shrub, small tree, found in Australia, elongated fruit like a gherkin. Juice is acidic, similar to lime, and it's usually being produced just as a gourmet bush food or as a flavoring. So here we have a finger lime, and some people here are growing it as a ornamental. Here are the fruits. Here's a close-up of the fruits called a finger lime because it looks a bit like a finger. Here are the different fruits. They come in different colors, and if you squeeze them, you can see they look a little bit like caviar. And we got a grapefruit. Grapefruit is a cross between pomelo and sweet orange. Think about that. Yeah, you could do that. Think about pomelo, think about grapefruit. Sure, that could orange. That could be a grapefruit. First recorded in Barbados, subsequently found in Jamaica. Apparently the name was given because the fruits appeared in grape-like clusters, which I've never really been able to work out. And sometimes it was known as the forbidden fruit of Barbados. Came into the USA in the late 1800s as a novelty, and the popularity increased as they found a plant with red flesh growing in the warm climate of Texas, which produced much sweeter fruits. So this is the highest cultivar to produce fruits with high sugar. So this fruits come out from Florida and Texas, warmer parts of Arizona and California. If you don't have a warm part of where you are, don't try growing grapefruit. Probably won't be warm enough to give you sweet fruit. Here's a typical grapefruit. I suppose that could be a bunch of grapes, and you've got different red and white grapefruit. Tangelo is a cross between a tangerine and a pomelo. Those of you who know Tangelo, yeah, that's true, that could work. Tangerine and pomelo, I can see that. Or tangerine and grapefruit, that could work as well. Fruits are the same size as an orange, easier to peel, contain a lot of juice, and they have a distinctive knob at the top of the fruit. That's the big thing about Tangelo. They have this knob at the top of the fruit. And many varieties are now, crosses are now being made in nurseries between tangerine and grapefruit to produce their own varieties. So here we have a Tangelo with a distinctive knob at the end. And then we've got ugly fruit, which sometimes you see in crossword puzzles and so on, discovered growing in Jamaica and thought to be an accidental cross between a mandarin and a grapefruit. Yeah, I can see that. Sometimes called a Jamaican Tangelo. Again, the fruit peels easily, contains a lot of juice, and it's marketed as a novelty fruit and fairly expensive. So here is an ugly fruit. Kumquat, something originated in Japan. It was fruits are very small, small oranges, skin is sweeter, fruits can be eaten whole, often used in making marmalades or candies. A lot of people grow kumquat. Here it is. A lot of people grow kumquat as an ornamental in a bucket, and I mean not a bucket, in a pot or something as an ornamental fruit. And then I came across after this, somebody asked me about limequat, which I had not come across. You got a limequat, which is a cross between a key lime and a kumquat. A small producing many fruits, small, oval, greenish yellow, and like kumquats has an edible sweet tasting skin, but a bittersweet pulp. And again, it's used in cocktails, fruit salads, and they can be candied whole. And here is kumquat, here's a kumquat here and a limequat here. Obviously, you can see how easily it is to cross, that various crosses have in fact developed over the years, and sometimes they've stuck and sometimes they haven't. And then we've also got calamondin, which is thought to be a cross between a tangelo and a kumquat. originating in China and Asia, very popular in the Philippines, used as cooking for juice, small fruit, thin, loose peel, and acid. And so again, it's commonly grown as an ornamental. So here you have the calamondin being grown as an ornamental, and kumquat is sometimes grown like that too. So finally, I'm just going to end up quickly with citrus. I like to do crossword puzzles, and some of you too, and I came across a clue: citrus commonly used in Japanese cuisine, a 4-letter citrus commonly used in Japanese cuisine. And I had, after giving you all of that previous one, I thought, you mean there's another citrus I don't know about? Well, here's the answer: yuzu. I got the answer when I got the answer to the puzzle the next day. Never heard of yuzu. Here it is, yuzu, thought to be a hybrid between a mandarin and this one, Ichang papeda, originating in China or South Korea, which is why it's used in Eastern cooking, has many thorns and leaves with winged petioles, can withstand most of all citrus, thick rind, very little juice, used to flavor Japanese and Korean cuisine. And this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like, a fruit that you can see. This is the one parent, this is the other parent, and this is the yuzu here. You can see thick skin, not much juice, a lot of seeds, and you can, I said it had a winged petiole, and you can see here, there is the winged petiole. So this was a new one for me, yuzu, and if any of you have a crossword puzzle to get, you'll be able to answer the question. So I hope this has shown you how much more there is to citrus than just oranges and lemons. So when you eat your next citrus fruit with your friends, you'll be able to give them all kind of information about what it is they're eating. And I finally end up with this slide. If anybody's got any gardening questions, not the phone, we're not answering phones, but in Ventura, you can email a question to this email address, and you'll get an answer, hopefully. That's it.